We want to talk about innovation. We want to talk about new industries. We want to talk about New York. We want to talk about, does New York play a role in the world, not in the United States? It's not hard to compete with other cities in the United States. New York must compete with other centers in the world. And can New York be a great center for innovation and growth of new industries once again? It's done it many, many times, gone through many, many cycles. So I'd like to introduce this panel. Our Pettits and our Riveras and our... So first is Jay Apt. Jay, would you join me on the stage? Jay Apt is the executive director. Yeah, that's fine. Good. So Jay is the executive director of the Carnegie Mellon Electricity Industry Center. He is also an associate research professor at the Tepper School of Business, as well as a distinguished service professor in the Department of Engineering and Public Policy in the College of Engineering. Is there a school you don't work for?
Well, not one that I
John,
don't
he doesn't
visit.
do it. Doesn't he do anything at HNSS? No, he does. No. Okay. So, Alfred Spector. Alfred, can you join us? Alfred is the Vice President of Research and Special Initiatives at Google. In this capacity, he's responsible for the collection of special projects of strategic value to the company, but that are somewhat outside the mainstream of its current products. I don't know if there is anything outside of Google's mainstream any longer. No one's safe from Google. Previously, he served as a tenured faculty member in Carnegie Mellon's computer science department. Third is David Steiner. David is the chairman of Steiner Equities Group. He's had a long and distinguished history as a real estate developer. With his son Douglas, David has also built Steiner Studios, a film and television production company that opened in 2004 in Brooklyn. David is a graduate of Carnegie Institute of Technology. And finally, but not least, David Tepper. David is president and founder of Appaloosa Management. David earned his MBA from Carnegie Mellon. I hate to admit he's a Pitt graduate. That's another joke I'll tell you sometime. Appaloosa Management is a $7 billion hedge fund. 12 billion. And that just happened today. It was 7 yesterday. $12 billion hedge fund investment based in Chatham, New Jersey. In March 2004, Carnegie Mellon's Graduate School of Industrial Administration was formerly known for a long time as GSIA, was formally named the David A. Tepper School of Business after the generous gift made by David and his wife, Marlene. The gentlemen, welcome. I'm going to move over here, and my mic should still work. Yeah, that's great. Yeah. So, let me get down to it. By the way, these questions have been sealed in a hermetically sealed jar. Actually, they've seen the questions.
And the answers.
First question. Historian John Steele Gordon wrote an essay for the Wall Street Journal in September called Don't Bet Against New York. In it, he wrote, "Only time will tell if New York will do what it has done so many times before, recover from economic disaster and become bigger, better, richer, and more diverse than it was before. But I wouldn't bet against it. Deep within the heart of this vast metropolis, like the child within the adult, there is still to be found that little hustly, bustly, live and let live, let's make a deal Dutch village. And the creation of wealth is still the city's dearest love." So guys, from your perspective, on New York, the way you look at it, whether it's arts, finance, IT, energy, or whatever perspective you look at New York, how do you feel about this statement? How do you feel about New York's future? And what role do you think New York will play in the next 30 years?
Where do you want to start?
Anybody can start.
All right, well, shoot, I mean, my perspective is New York is about money. Right? Anybody not think that? So let me tell you a little energy story, right? I study the electric power industry. It's a $450 billion a year industry. that'd get your attention even if you live in New York. But I got to tell you something. Because of what's likely to happen sometime with carbon dioxide control in the U.S., there's going to be another $100 billion a year added to that industry. That sound interesting to anybody in this room? Okay. Even in New York, $100 billion a year sounds pretty good. That's about twice the size of Microsoft every year. I think there's going to be people in this room are going to get very, very involved in something that big.
David, you created $5 billion in the last 24 hours. So
It's actually the last 2 weeks. But,
last 2 weeks. Okay, well.
2 weeks, I said so. But, look, I mean, I can tell you today why New York's never going to stop. I'm just outside, and I was approached a couple times by people in this room, and you know who you are. About businesses that are starting up. It never stops, and it will never stop. Whether it's somebody just coming from Pittsburgh, or somebody, I guess it was Pittsburgh, Stanford, Pittsburgh, if I got that right. You know who you are. One way or another, you end up in New York. And this is the center of commerce, the center of finance, what has always been and always will. So.
I want to tell you from a different perspective. My industry is small potatoes compared to these guys here, but I'm a civil engineering graduate who somehow, in a momentary aberration, went into the film business. I built movie studios at the behest of my son, violating my 3 basic principles: stick to what you know, don't roll the ranch, and figure the odds carefully. But there I am. But I want to tell you about the film industry, which I've come to love. The film industry is the 21st century of manufacturing. Film is the type of technology that New York excels at. We have the infrastructure, we have the trained people. And the next cycle will not be driven by the industries that are here, and I call that the FIRE economy: financial, insurance, and real estate, because they are portable industries. They don't have to be in New York. They choose to be in New York, but eventually they're going to go to the lowest cost of operation because they have the technology and the phones to do it. But by the nature of the film business, you require a very big infrastructure, a huge amount of plant, and it's not easily relocatable. And it's so different. You can't just pick it up and move it. And it's so different than the other industries we've had before. There were a clothing industry, all kinds of things. But the film industry is the industry of the 21st century. And that's
what do you think about that, Alfred?
So I'm the research leader here. And,
wait, your mic's not on for some reason.
What do I do about that? Let me take someone else's.
Is he the tech guy?
Yeah, that figures.
How about this? Is that on now?
Don't invest in his company.
Is it on?
Take this. We'll switch here quickly.
You have to undress to
Have to
show.
undress. It's all right, we can do that. We're CMU graduates.
So I'll just start talking. I'll just talk here. We go. Perfect. Okay, great. All right, anyway. So look, I'm the research lead here, and I don't want to start with money, despite the fact that Google has done fairly well. What I want to start with is you guys, you're here and your talent. This is the second largest convocation of CMU alumni, I gather, and you're here in New York. So New York is an incredible draw for talent. That's why Google is in New York, more than anything else, is that it's a draw for talent. And it always has been. And I think that's essential. It's particularly essential in the IT fields. IT is a field where all the opportunity is fueled by extremely creative people that see the connections between IT and absolutely everything else. Everything else is represented in New York. If we have the talent, we combine them and do this expanding sphere of IT into many, many directions. And I think that's a big part of the future. I think New York will play a big part in it because of its talent.
What do you think about this view, though, that David had about because you're enabling the ability. You need talent, and you need to go to the centers of talent, but you're enabling a society that can work anywhere. That can get information instantaneously, can work anywhere, and makes locus less important.
Well, so in fact, I give a talk and talk frequently about something which I call totally transparent processing. Right? We're translating amongst 41 different languages.
That thing works. You can start.
And we're providing information on every different kind of device in a transparent way, and operating across different modalities: voice, image, video, in a kind of convergent way as well, and trying to work across every corpus of information. So that's true. We are trying to break down all barriers and create a really transparent world of information sharing and communication. But that being said, there's still a reason that people want to be together with other vibrant and exciting people, and we see that in our recruiting at Google, which we have done and are doing a lot of. We see that across the New York area. I don't think you can break that down just because you make communication really great.
Jay, you're an expert in electricity industry. Is there enough energy to support New York's growth and the concentrate? It's not just New York. New York, in a microcosmic way, is the same as many of the big city urban centers in Asia that are growing now that don't have enough energy to support their growth. Does New York have enough energy to support its growth?
Barely. The answer is that New York is not as bad off as where it just was a week ago in Mumbai. They're trying to go from 20 gigawatts, never mind the units, to 60 by 2030. But New York is close to the edge. The requirements of New York say that there has to be added between now and mid-decade the equivalent of the Indian Point nuclear facility. That's about 2.5 gigawatts of power. And it's just not happening. And so somebody's going to make some money figuring out how to do that and how to do it cleanly. New York already has pretty clean power. It's got about a third of its power coming from nuclear, about 20% from hydro, and about a third from natural gas. It's very little coal compared to the rest of the country. They're putting in a fair amount of wind. But it's going to be a tight squeeze to get the power that New York needs.
What do you think the new power plants will be for New York use?
The biggest new power plants are going in right up by the Canadian border, and they're wind.
Wind.
But they only have...
But it's not baseload.
It's not baseload. They only work about a third of the time.
Yeah.
The baseload stuff's probably going to be natural gas. And that's going to work just fine until we run out of the Marcellus Shale. And then we're going to be seeing big fleets of LNG tankers coming from our good friends in Russia.
David, another important source of growth in New York is, of course, the financial services industry. This administration has been long on regulation of the industry. We're seeing new regulation every day. Where do you think this ends up? How does the financial services industry fare in how we sort all this?
Well, fortunately, this is not the only country in the world doing re-regulation of the financial industry. And frankly, they haven't really done anything yet here. They've done much more in London, which is the other real competing financial center. So there is a little bit more exodus, or people talking, and also exodus from London, and also the tax rates gone up in England. So tax rates matter in that respect. But look, I think the point that was made before. This is a place where people want to be, whether it's here, and again, it could be London is another place people want to be. There's really no great center yet in Asia, financial center yet in Asia. I suspect there will be at some point, and there should be at some point. But there's no way that you're going to have a financial center that's not New York in this part of the hemisphere. You'll probably still have London, even though there's some migration out of the city right now for different regulatory reasons. But this is a worldwide re-regulation. This is just not a United States phenomenon.
What has this done to curb or stymie the young talent that wants to go into financial? Of course, you get bubbles in financial services like you get in consulting, or you get into high tech, and it generates a lot of interest from youth coming through with bachelor's and master's degrees. But what's this done to youth wanting to go into the industry?
I don't know if it's done anything yet. It should do something, because there'll probably be less opportunities at the big brokerage firms. I think one thing that's really hard right now is we were talking about it earlier, is it's harder to start a business for a lot of different reasons. One of that is the fundraising is very difficult right now, not just the regulation, but in answer to your first question, it is a little bit more difficult to start a small firm because of regulatory hurdles that are just building make it much tougher to start a firm. You just need more people, more back office people, but it gives a little bit of competitive advantage to established firms, which is also always the case with regulatory hurdles. As nothing ever changes. That's the fact of regulatory hurdles. As far as young people going into the industry, it is still incredibly, and always will be, very entrepreneurial. You can do very small firms or try to start very small on your own. You still can. It is a little bit more. It is a little bit tougher because of those regulatory hurdles, but it definitely the environment is definitely going to make it a little bit tougher.
So David, you're the new
expert
on film, the 21st century industry.
Well, let me tell you.
Why is this? How can this industry become so much bigger than it is now?
Well,
and fill in some of these voids that are going to exist.
I was going to talk about a big jump of $2.5 billion, but I'm ashamed to even bring it up. When we started out, the New York film industry was $5 billion. In 3 years, we've increased that to $7.5 billion. We have perhaps 100,000 people in the entertainment industry, and the $7.5 billion that I'm talking about is only about film, and it only came about one way, because my son and I and a few friends went up and lobbied for tax credits for attracting new business. I mean, the state is giving away money for people to locate in office buildings, but we're getting tax credits, 35% of what we call below the line. That's the working people, not the salaries of...
But isn't this like food? I mean, how can you consume more and more entertainment? Or are you talking about video games that kids are into, and you're including all?
I'm just talking about the film aspect. Yeah. It's such a big business, and now we have 200 or 300 cable stations that need product, and the only thing that I think is going to stymie us from doing it is not to be able to depend on the continuation of the tax credits. Because I talked to some people in New York, and they say, "Well, you've already got them here. You don't need to attract them anymore." I'm in a business where I have a factory with 5 or 7 stages, but every 6 months we have a new operator of the factory. He sets up a new machine shop, he builds sceneries, he writes scripts, he comes in, and in 6 months he's gone. So we have to continue that, and people are afraid to come here because there's no continuity of the guarantee of the tax credits, which, by the way, yield much more. They're revenue positive, both to the city and to the state. But I don't think that's going to happen because of politics. Every politician thinks he has the answers, and they all know what to do, but they don't really understand our business. You can't be in business unless you're assured of a prime aspect, and unless we have the continuity of an assuredness of tax credits, we're never going to succeed. We're going to start to go downhill unless we can convince the political structure that it's a different kind of business. But the growth, LA is the center. There's no reason why we can't take it from LA, because everybody in the industry wants to be in New York. They don't want to be in South Carolina or Vancouver. Mel Brooks said to me when we had the opening of my studios and he was doing the producer, he said, "You know why I came to New York and why I don't like Toronto? Because the bagels in Toronto are too mushy." Well, that says a lot about New York. New York is where it's at. We all want to be here. We just need a little help to make sure that they stay. We have to get people to think about what's important for the future.
Alfred, are you allowed on Madison Avenue? Do you take strolls down Madison Avenue?
I think so.
Well,
I think we are, and that's another reason, of course, Google's in New York. It's near Madison Avenue.
Yeah. So Madison Avenue is the center of advertising. Google has obviously changed the game in advertising. So, does Madison Avenue change with you? I mean, my experience is they've not been changing quickly.
Well, I've been watching Mad Men in preparation for this question.
Love Mad Men. I love Mad Men.
So, no, look, what I think is going on is there's a tremendous opportunity for incredible creativity across advertising broadly. You just look at all the new outlets for advertising, all the new forms of creative advertising that can happen on those outlets. There are interesting questions on how to make advertisements more valuable to the people that see them. And there are indeed privacy issues around those things. But if advertising is really, to a large degree, an information dissemination mechanism, which it is, how do you make it ever more effective in that regard for mutual benefit of the consumer and the advertiser? There are all the auction opportunities to deal with the vast amount of space and property that's available on which to do advertising. It's a tremendously rich domain, and it's a really fascinating one. There's every reason to think there'll be need for immense creativity to utilize all the opportunity that's there.
How much, to all of you, how much of New York's diverse number of industries working together? In other words, the same way Carnegie Mellon thinks about its multidisciplinary culture serving the growth of the university, New York, I would imagine, is the same way. But do you see stovepipes in New York where financial services, advertising is advertising, tech is tech? Do you think there is a real benefit or competitive benefit to New York because we have such large industries that can mix together and become morph into new types of opportunities? Or do you think it's just simply destined to compete industry to industry?
I'll go back to what I said earlier. I do think IT is common to many industries. It's common to film, it's common to finance, it's common to healthcare, it's common to education, it's common to the media, advertising. So I think because we have a very talented IT sector here, partially because of the great universities, partially Bell Labs had a huge amount of talent in this area, and other research labs, and a lot of legacy there. I think that does tie us together, and there's a lot of fluidity in IT professionals moving across domains. We've seen that.
I'd probably say the same in energy. In New York, the folks that I see in the finance sector are almost entirely engineers or physicists that have moved over into finance, either from nuclear, and in the area that you know a lot about, in renewable energy, there's no question that fluidity is going to be absolutely critical.
We're seeing this struggle happen in Silicon Valley now, where a lot of the investing that's happened in prior industries that are rife for venture capital, like life sciences or IT, it was easy to found companies, to discover companies in Silicon Valley, grow them there, and those became the home of those large companies, different tech companies and life sciences, maybe in Southern California as well. And now in energy, it's pulled us out of Silicon Valley.
Interesting.
The locus of talent is not in Silicon Valley in there. We still see companies born every day in Silicon Valley. People think they can do something in energy with the smarts and skills they have, but we're being pulled to the East Coast. We're being pulled to Germany. We're being pulled to China. It's not a local business at all. I'd like to go to the floor too. So
I just want to say one more
while we're talking,
thing.
please let's get a microphone.
I want to say one more thing about New York. Mm-hmm. New York is the center of everything. It has the vitality. It's always been the growing place for America. All the immigrants that came in from every culture, and it's continuing. Everybody comes to New York, and that diversity, it just makes things work. You can find somebody to do everything, and you have people here who have the guts and the courage to step forward, like me. Well, I was only a builder. What did I know about all this stuff? And you can do it here, and if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere.
Well, you had to coin that.
Yes, Frank.
I thought California was diverse too, because I went out there. I found all these liberals, and I thought, boy, this is really diverse.
You're talking about my people.
Do we have a question from the floor? Let's turn up the lights a little bit, and let's open this up a little bit, because we were talking beforehand that we'd really like to go with your questions as opposed to my questions. In the back, gentleman has his hand up. You want to, state your name, school. Okay, great.
what can we do to prevent the increased volatility? There's threats of inflation in the next few years, and New York is. We saw the New York of the 60s and the 70s. We don't want to go back to that period where there was 10% unemployment for elongated periods of time. How can we use innovation in the next few years to prevent this, to get people into green jobs quickly, and to ensure that New York doesn't have this blip, short-term blip, where unemployment and the situation becomes increasingly volatile?
Anybody want to take that?
You asked 4 different questions, so I'll answer the first question you asked because I think it was a finance question, and somebody else can answer other ones. Volatility in the markets, recent volatility is a function of leverage. If you regulate or change the leverage in the system, you'll lower the volatility in the system. That's the main way to do it. Hopefully, if they're going to regulate one thing, that's what they should regulate in that respect. Just one thing, sometimes a little volatility in a system is not a bad thing because it creates innovation. So sometimes you have to create things. Some things that don't work over time have to be destroyed, and other things have to be created again. So you don't want to totally kill innovation. You don't want to totally kill creativity, and you don't want to totally kill volatility for that reason. But I'll let others.
Great answer, David.
There's
a baseline question here. I just want to make sure we capture these 4 questions into really the baseline question, which is, how do we produce jobs?
Okay, I'll tell you what the biggest problem that we have, speaking as a small entrepreneur and being friendly with other people, you can't get any money from the banks to finance your business. It's become impossible. Lines of credit are not being extended. I built a business in real estate on mortgaging. That's all gone. What are we going to do that? Somehow, the banks have to open the spigot. We've given them money, and they're not using the money for what it was intended. A little guy can't get a letter of credit. He can't get money for payroll. And this country is built on a basis of small business. It isn't the big corporations that make the job. It's guys like me and the other guy down the street who has 30 employees. Unless the banks are going to give us the money, we're not going to go anywhere.
Well, what did the mayor say about this in the recent election? Sure, I don't know.
He's happy he made it.
Did he? I mean, this is a big issue in California. 12% unemployment.
You know what?
So
the mayor,
jobs are key.
This mayor, truthfully, did a fantastic job that this city's not bankrupt right now.
Right.
So you have to give, whether you love him, hate him, who knows? I'm not a New Yorker. I'm in New Jersey, unfortunately, fortunately. The Corsign's not there anymore. But it really was a fairly fantastic job because in other times when Wall Street fell down, this city really was on the brink of bankruptcy. And you really had a mayor that kind of had the foresight to keep that from happening this time. So it's never going to be perfect.
Right.
But
so I was just going to comment on innovation. So we have huge things happening in the economy, in biotech, and energy, and information technology, and medicine, and education. They're huge things. So it's really going to be, I think, our ability as a society to leverage the opportunities in innovation and the new ways of doing innovation, the open collaborative platforms that we have to work with each other to try to leverage each other's talents. I think we have to have a lot of confidence that innovation will, in effect, come to the rescue of a lot of this as long as we have the energy to pursue it.
I agree with that. Having grown up in Pittsburgh, I watched Pittsburgh go through it the painful way to lose the steel industry and to reform itself, and it was kind of a testimony to the life of Pittsburgh when President Obama picked it as a locus for the G20. But there's a less painful way to do it, and that is through innovation and keep that innovation at home. Other question? Right here in front.
Hi, it's Robert Albertson. I was in Pittsburgh for a long time. Very fortunate to have gone to Carnegie. I know all about innovation. I can't say more good things about it, but this whole panel's on, I gather, where New York goes and innovation. What about the infrastructure issues that hold it back so much? The power that we need is in Canada. We can't get it because we don't have a grid. We've got a water supply system going through rickety tunnels. Of all the cities I can think of in the country, New York is probably the most vulnerable for the most mundane problems, and those would be the ones that would start the jobs and keep the city going. As much as innovation is a fascinating subject, the bedrock, I worry, is slipping away. What would any of you say to that?
Well, let me comment on a couple of infrastructure issues and one general thing. The general thing is that when I look at the difference between here and some other place, I was just in Mumbai a week ago, the difference is confidence. The folks here have the confidence that you actually aren't seeing among some of the folks with the same talent in Mumbai. People in New York have chutzpah, right? You know how to get some stuff done. There is a wonderful new water tunnel that's happening, despite all of the problems that were occurring. Personally, I think that what we're going to see is a fair number of new natural gas electricity units put in the city in Long Island. Long Island and the city don't have many transmission lines coming in, so they got to have 90 or 95%, depending on whether you're in the city or Long Island, of the power generated locally. It's been getting done. And I'm not that worried about the infrastructure in New York. I'm more worried about the infrastructure in places like Des Moines. New York has the confidence, and you guys are getting things done. You really are.
Jay, how do we, other than, I guess, natural gas plants, how do we get energy that could be created, renewable energy that can be created in other places? You know, it's
I think that
sun, wind,
Yep.
nuclear, we're just not moving fast enough.
The biggest new thing that hasn't been tapped so far is offshore wind. Onshore wind blows at night. You don't use much electricity at night except for that spotlight there, right? Offshore wind blows during the day. And I think what we're going to see off the East Coast is going to be a fair amount of offshore wind going in. It's going to have a higher duty cycle than the onshore wind. We're going to see some DC transmission lines connecting it. I think we're going to see some new nuclear plants in this country, in the South, probably a half a dozen of them. And if they work, by work I mean if they come in at good cost and if the performance is good, we may see a few more. Nuclear is going to have to run hard to stay in place. We're going to need of the order of 30 new nuclear plants by 2030 to even keep the current market share. But I think there's some innovations that you and I both know about that we can't predict which one is going to come on big. But I think that there's tens of billions of dollars in some of those industries.
But it's not the innovation. It's not the innovation here. It's the fact that it's a NIMBY, not in my backyard. You have wind they won't let go off of, in New England. Or will they let wind go off of the coast here? They won't let nuclear in Long Island. They closed that plant years ago.
Yeah.
Dick, do you see wind turbines in Cape Cod?
I think that the chances are pretty good that you're going to see European-size wind farms off the east coast of the U.S. By off the east coast, I mean on the outer continental shelf. The one that got stopped south of Jones Beach got stopped for a few reasons, not least of which because it was very expensive to put the pilings, but also because it was in a dumb place. There was only one substation you could connect it.
Because the innovation's there.
Yeah, I think David's right. I can't make a cell phone call because you put a tower in Atherton.
The other David wants to agree with this, David. You know what the problem is? We've got a lot of projects that need being done. The infrastructure in this country has been neglected for 20, 30 years. We have bridges falling down. We need water. We need schools. And here we are throwing away all that money in Iraq and Afghanistan. For what we spend 1 year, we could have had all brand new power plants in this country. It's a goddamn shame, I think. We've got to refocus our energy and put our money in America. That's where it belongs.
Okay, right there. A hand up. Okay? Oh, he's got the microphone.
Yes, this question, Gordon Ward, the Heinz School. This question is for Mr. Steiner.
Yes.
I'd like to get your thoughts about the growth of the film industry in New York. When you think about the cost of doing business of filming in New York, given the cost of dealing with the labor unions, and then also from a technology standpoint, with the growth of special effects, of being able to use technology to give a New York-like feel without actually being in New York.
Well, let me tell you two things about that. First of all, the film industry likes to be under one roof. That's been the success of LA. They want to have everything. We don't have a special effects industry. We really need one in New York if we're going to compete. And we need more shops. I hope they don't come so soon until I make a few bucks on my place. But you need places like we have, 300,000 foot of the latest up-to-date technology so they can come in and operate at low economical prices. What's happening now is because LA makes all the decisions. They run everything, and they're exporting for the lowest possible cost. And unless we can prevent them somehow from shipping all the business overseas, we're just creating competition instead of spending the money here. We're training a cadre of people in New Zealand, in Czechoslovakia, and they're all going to be our competition. Let's put our energy here somehow. Let's transfer the center of power to New York. That's where it belongs. I hope I answered your question.
If anybody out there has a comment on the David's NIMBY issue, I think it'd be really interesting if anybody's studying this or figuring out how will we change the static energy in this country to give up what we think is a right. Go ahead, right here. Okay. Go ahead, ask your question.
I have a mic I'm supposed to give
Somebody
back.
has a mic.
Yes.
Go ahead. If you have the mic, you have control.
Thank you. That's what I thought. I'm a CMU mom. I have a son in the civil engineering department who is very interested in film and actually works for CMU TV.
Interesting. We're doing something wrong here, Jerry.
I have one question for Professor Apt and another for the whole panel. As regards energy, the NIMBY issue is enormous in New York, and that's why there are no more power plants. I grew up a few miles from Indian Point, and I don't think you'll ever see another one built anywhere in the major metropolitan area. You didn't mention solar energy, and is that because we're so overcast? And the other question about energy
Not
is...
as bad as Pittsburgh, but close.
There are things you can put in water that take advantage of the currents that I wonder if those wouldn't work better in this whole area than windmills, because windmills are so expensive and so politically undesirable in people's sightlines off the Hamptons, off of Massachusetts, and so on. So that's one question. The other is about the term labor arbitrage. At the same time, my son was filling out his applications for the engineering department. There were stories in the Wall Street Journal about mid-career engineers training their H-1B replacements. And just as a panel up there and as a university and as a body of people looking at our future, it's just, you know, where is globalization going to take us if it's taking the jobs away from mid-career people? Thank you.
Okay, so let's try to do this quickly. Jay, you want to start with
Sure. First, on the tidal and wave energy, there's a company called Verdant Power that put 5 turbines in the East River here. Pulled them out because of the problem of biological fouling. Gook gets in them. And that's been the experience all over. There's a fair amount of energy in the tides and in the currents, but it's tiny compared to either wind or especially to solar. The reason why you don't see so much solar isn't entirely due to the cloudiness. It's due to the cost. Solar power is about 5 times as costly as wind power, which is in turn about 30% more costly than, say, natural gas power.
But solar, let me take 2 comments. Solar cost is coming down fast.
You bet.
You look at First Solar or SunPower's projected costs, they're going to come down real fast for PV or even in the solar thermal business, which probably has more of a floor. But those PV costs are coming down very, very fast. The problem is New York has poor DNI. It just doesn't get the yield out of solar energy that a California or New Mexico can get, which gets us back to transmission lines.
That's the
Getting
problem.
the power, because you can ship electricity a long way with a 10% degradation. So we need to generate the power in the west, get it to the east.
So there's the other question.
On hydro, I don't agree with Jay totally. I think small hydro has a lot of potential. Large hydro, big dams we know about, but small hydro, because there is innovation happening with small hydro in streams and small rivers and everything to deal with some of that biological
I was just
problem.
addressing the ocean power.
Yeah.
I agree that there is small hydro that can get done. And indeed, New York gets 30% of its, 20% of its power.
Okay, the second question was a bit, it was kind of...
It was really a globalization question and how globalization
I would
is
call
going
it
to hurt certain
protectionist.
No, she's...
But yeah.
The thing with globalization is it's unfortunate. It is absolutely unfortunate. In some industries, there are going to be losers. But the truth about globalization is it makes the pie totally bigger for everybody in the world. And if you try to stop globalization, you make the pie smaller. Now, while you're making that pie bigger, and it has worked to make the pie bigger here in general, there are people who will suffer. You can't stop it. It's one of those, the volatility question from before. It's just can't stop. And so it is an unfortunate thing. And policy, in some ways, government policy is supposed to help some of those people when that pie gets smaller. But long term, there will be people that will do certain jobs that we do here. We will do other jobs here. And the question is, you just have to let that take course. And the government probably has to kind of smooth that over, the different governments in the world, I think. So I don't know if that answers your question.
But there's no limit to innovation. So if more innovation is done in China,
absolutely right.
That's fine. And we'll do more innovation here. Talent is what's going to drive, though, our capability. So when you look at all of these so-called labor arbitrage issues, the solution to it is talent in education. And, of course, that's why we're here tonight.
Gentlemen, I want to thank you for participating in the panel, and I want to thank you